welcome to another video. I'm Anne and I'm an artist and author living in Los Angeles. On this channel, I cover the behind the scenes of my life as an artist and I share all the things that I've learned in over a decade of being in the industry. So if you're interested in that, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Instagram at AnneDanger. I've been painting with gouache for over 10 years and I get asked all the time, what are the best supplies for beginners? I'm going to show you what's in my art supply bag and all the different price points from low to high so that you can choose what works best for your budget. Let's get started. Okay, we're going to start with sketchbooks. So this is my drawing sketchbook for every day. It's a sketchbook I got as a gift. It's by the brand Handbook. And I really like it. It's good for most materials. Like I used a Tombow marker here. Tombow markers look like this. And they're dual-ended. I also did my gouache exercises in this sketchbook. And you can see it really dried down nice and flat and even. One thing I wouldn't use in it is watercolor because it warps it too much. And then I also do my observational sketches and my studies in here with one of my favorite drawing utensils, which is just a cheap ballpoint pen. Here's a sketchbook I love and will buy over and over again. It's the Kunst and Papier sketchbook. They come in a variety of sizes. This one I think is it's 21 centimeters by 21 centimeters, which is, I want to say about 8 by 8. And you can see this is where I do most of my painting exercises for my YouTube. Sometimes I'll skip a page just so like, there's no bleed through, but sometimes I just like it really clean. So I'll skip a page and have my little paintings in between. This is a great gouache sketchbook. It holds the paint really well. You can see I also drew with colored pencils on here and it just takes it really clean and it doesn't smudge. And then what I like about it is that it lays really flat because of the way it's bound. So it makes it really easy to paint. And then when I'm getting to like the end of the sketchbook, I'll usually put another sketchbook underneath it when I'm painting just to keep it more flat and even. So these are my favorite sketchbooks too. This is just a sticker I put on it. They normally look like this. This is another watercolor sketchbook that I was trying out. It's a lower price sketchbook and it's by Arteza. It also lays flat, but like in between the signatures, which is what it's called when they're like sewn together in little bundles. It's not as flat. And as you can see, this is a cold press watercolor paper. So there's texture to it, which is just not my preference, but it's a solid painting sketchbook. I did my fruit paintings in this, as you can see. And I like to use the other side as like little color swatches or sample swatching or doing little color studies for what the full piece is gonna look like. But again, it's more textured, so it's not my top preference, but I do like it if you like that cold press texture. Another sketchbook I really like is this Strathmore mixed media one. It's a little bigger, and then it also is like a smooth, thicker paper, so it takes paint really, really well. I did my Barbie one in this, so you can see it takes gouache really well. And yeah, I just really like this one. This is a really solid option as well and much easier to find than the Kunst and Papier. And then finally, this is just a classic Strathmore sketchbook. The 9x12 is where I do a lot of just my thinking work and thumbnailing for bigger projects in here. So I can't show you what's inside because there's a lot of confidential projects inside. But this you can find at any Michael's or Blick or any art supply store or easily online. And it is just a really solid sketchbook for drawing in and even doing like small little paintings in. I've been using this since I was a kid and could draw, and like the only place we could go to was Michael's. And I still love it the best. I still always just come back to this because I just feel like this is where I could do most of my really good workshopping of projects. Okay, like for example, I'll show you a sneak peek of when I was working on my Aristocats home line with Disney. This was like one of the sketches where I was working out the ultimate final piece has been released, but you could see how I really did really rough sketches to kind of work out my thoughts in words and in sketches. Next, we're going to move on to palettes. So here's a variety of palettes that I like to use for gouache painting. Note they are all ceramic are enamel finished because that makes it easier to clean. I find that using the cheaper plastic palettes are great, but they do tend to stain over time eventually. Here's an example of a plastic one that I used for a long time. You can see even after multiple washes, it's definitely stained, which makes it harder just to mix your color and get it accurate because color really interacts with the color it's next to. So it's just not as ideal. So these have been used many, many times, and you can see they're still perfectly neutral. And so one of my favorite palettes is just this standard flower ceramic palette that you can get at most art supply stores or online. It's a really solid palette. 10 out of 10. Another one of my favorite types of palettes is this really cheap option. It's from a store called Daiso, where everything's like $1.50. You could buy a ton of these little ceramic dishes that are for food, but you can use them for painting as well. And what I like is that you can get a ton of them and then just like save your paint on there if you're going to mix a lot of paint. These are great for that. You could put a little saran wrap over it to save the paint if you really want to do that. And love the Daiso dishes. Another favorite option of mine lately especially is this vintage egg plate. You've probably seen it in most of my videos. I just got it on Etsy, but you could find it at any thrift store. These double egg plates are really plenty and very cheap. What I like about them is, of course, they already have the built-in wells, but they have a lot of them. Like the flower ones usually come with like 6. This comes with a dozen, of course, and you could just mix a lot more paint on this, but still keep it in its individual wells, and that's what I really like about it. So these are always my favorite to recommend, and I always love vintage and recycling anything for multiple uses. And then another solid option is this enamel tray, which I think is also used in cooking too, but I've always used it in painting. What's really great about it is that you could get this in this size or even bigger, so you can have a really big palette. Sometimes what you can do to keep your paints wet if you live in a drier place is put a folded wet paper towel down on one section and then a piece of parchment or wax paper also folded over the wet paper towel, and then squeeze your paint on top of that, and that'll keep your paint straight out of the tube wetter for longer if you need that, and then you take some of that and mix it over here. That's if you're doing like really big paintings, that helps with that, or if you're working with acrylic. I don't really do that with gouache as much because gouache is re-wettable since it is a water-based medium, but that's just another option for what you can do with your paints. In fact, I might do a whole deep dive into palettes in a whole other YouTube video if you're interested, so let me know in the comments. Okay, now to one of the main attractions, the paint. So my preferred gouache of choice is the Winsor Newton Designer's Gouache. I think it's better to invest in designer's level gouache over beginner's gouache or like gouache sets or jelly gouache, just because you're going to be happier with the results. And if you're happy with the results, you're going to keep working at it. And that's just my experience. If it's different for you and you're totally happy with the Himi gouaches, people have done beautiful things with that as well. But here's what I use and what's in my art supply bag. And so here's a list of the colors that are in my box currently. You don't have to have all these colors. In fact, I'm going to go over the colors that you really need to get to start out. You need a big tube of permanent white. Permanent white is going to be the one that you need in the 37 milliliter because you will use a lot of this and go through a lot of it fast. Then I would recommend you get a burnt umber and an ultramarine. These two are a really great base to turn your paintings warmer or cooler in the shadows and for mixing together. And then I'd recommend you get a warm and cool of each hue. So I'd get a flame red and a permanent alizarin crimson, a turquoise blue and a primary blue, a brilliant yellow and a primary yellow, or a lemon yellow. And then these two colors are better if you get them straight with a tube because it's harder to mix perfectly. The Orange Lake Light and the Spectrum Violet. Purples are really hard to mix really well, so I always like to get purple straight from the tube as well. And then for greens, I like to get an olive green and a brilliant green. And then I also like yellow ochre and burnt sienna for mixing skin tones along with the burnt umber. And then finally, ivory black. And if you're going to get extra paints, here's what else I have on hand. I have a linden green for a nice lime green and a permanent green middle for a darker like emerald green. I have brilliant violet as the warmer counterpart to the spectrum violet. And then I have Opera Pink, which is one of my favorite colors. It's just a hot pink, and I feel like you can't get that fluorescence really out of anywhere. So Winsor Newton is my go-to usually. I also really like the Holbein gouaches. They're really fun, and I just treated myself to this palette. They have this collection of the 4 seasons and the colors that coordinate with that season according to them. So I just got this spring one because I love these colors in it. They just looked really fun and really fit my palette. And I really like Holbein gouaches. I've used them as well. And it was nice to get a full set of it. Full disclosure, this one was sent to me by Jerry's Artorama, but I really love Turner gouaches as well. They're a little bit harder to find here, and so I don't, because they're made in Japan, so I don't have as many of these either, but I do love the set that I have. So if you have access to it, I really like the Turner design gouaches as well. Another great option I want to talk about is acrylic gouache. Acrylic gouache is made by Holbein, but it's a different type of gouache than their design gouache. Acrylic gouache has like acrylic medium as its base, which means it's a plastic base and it does not re-wet, but it dries down matte like gouache, which is like what's really beautiful about it. And I actually find it easier for beginners to start with acrylic gouache than straight out gouache. When I was starting out, I used both, and I did find the acrylic gouache easier to use. I do like the flat velvet seamlessness you can get with gouache, so that's why I tend to use that more. But acrylic gouache is also a really, really solid option, and I love it, and I love this brand specifically, Holbein's acrylic gouache, and I just have a variety of colors that are similar to the ones I have for my design gouache set. And I hang it on my hanger that you saw at the beginning of this video and is linked below in my Amazon shop. A couple more paints I want to talk about are these. So for doing gold iridescence, what I've actually found is that acrylic is much better than gouache in doing metallics. And my favorite is this golden fluid acrylic in iridescent gold deep fine. I also like poster color, which is something that they use at Ghibli Studios, and I actually have a whole set of that. I don't use it as much, but I do use the gold one a lot for my paintings. And then this is if I really need an opaque white to clean up something. Even with the permanent white with gouache, it's still a little bit transparent when you apply it on. And this one is really just solid bleed-proof white, like it says. So I'd recommend these for your kit if you are looking for metallics and for a good cleanup white. Another thing I always have in my art supply bag is a spray bottle of water. Just a little one works, and you definitely want it for re-wetting your paints in a very light, even mist. It is the best. We're gonna get into drawing supplies. So I try to keep it simple. I don't spend a whole lot on drawing supplies. I love, like I said, just a Bic ballpoint pen that you can, easily get for free at the hotel if you're staying at a hotel or something. I love this for drawing. I love a mechanical pencil with a harder lead. I don't really care if it's 0.5 or 0.7. I think I lean towards 0.5, and I usually like at least an HB lead. It makes it really clean and not smudgy, and this is one of my favorites. I also like that it has a thicker grip. This is another one that's a Grip Plus one by Faber-Castell that I really like because I suffer from carpal tunnel and tendonitis, so a thicker grip really helps with that. When I'm like drawing for fun and want something really satisfying, I love a Blackwing pencil. They're the greatest for a reason. It's just really smooth, buttery, and you can get a good variation in value. So it's just really nice to draw with if you're doing like a drawing for the fun of doing the drawing. If I'm doing sketches just to get ideas and thumbnails across, I like to just do a mechanical pencil. And then when I'm transferring a painting or doing the under drawing for a painting, I like to use a coal erase, either scarlet, red, or blue. It kind of depends on the color of the painting. Whatever color will fade most into the paints. But I like a scarlet red, and then I just like sketch really lightly. I like using a coal erase underneath a painting because coal erase doesn't pick up in the paint, whereas with graphite, you'll pick up some of that in the paint and it'll like dull down your paint. And you definitely don't want that. Like this will not mix into your paint. And then my favorite erasers are like a rubber eraser for bigger areas. You truly can find this anywhere. I actually really like the ones at Daiso. They're really good. And this is one of my favorite erasers. It's the Tough Stick Eraser by Papermate. I've had it for so long that it's totally worn off, but it's a very nice, small, skinny eraser that'll get into like really tiny areas. And that's why I love this so much, especially for like after painting and you're cleaning up your painting, it really gets into the tiny areas. Next, we're talking about brushes. So the main thing that I want you to know about brushes is that this is an area where you can save money. Watercolor brushes and synthetic brushes are perfectly great with gouache. Anything you can find for sale at your Michaels section is great, or for sets online. And so here are just some of the brushes I have and use a lot. What's more important is that I really like round brushes, flat brushes, and then a small angled brush. I don't really use a whole lot of other types of brushes. There's also filbert, which is like this angled rounded top. I don't use those a whole lot. And you really don't even need as many brushes as I have here. This is just what's always on my table. And I always have more here. So this is a 00 brush. It's really, really tiny for all the detail work, but you know, a really great place to find tiny brushes is also the beauty supply store. Nail art brushes are really cheap, like cheaper than, paintbrushes, and you can get them in a big bundle, and those are great for painting detail. And then for round brushes, this is one of my favorites, the Princeton Heritage Round Brush. I really love the number 2 for this. And then I usually like to have a 4 and a 6. I believe this is a 4, and this is a 6 in round brushes. This is more Princeton Select. I think this is a brand that you can find easily at any art supply store or craft store near you. I have this in a 5, so you don't really need a 5, but you definitely want a 00, a 2, 4, 6. Depending on how big you paint, you might want an 8 as well. These are treacle brushes that were part of a collab, so that's why it's pink, but the treacle synthetic brushes for water mediums are really good as well. And then these Da Vinci ones, I'm pretty sure I found these all, this Princeton one and this Da Vinci one, I'm pretty sure I found these all at Aaron Brothers before they closed for good, but that just means you can find it at Michaels. These are all really easy to find brands. They're really solid. The brushes don't get loose, which is one of the problems you'll find with like more off-brand watercolor brushes. This part will come loose when it's really cheaply made. I've had these for years and years and they're still in great shape. And I really like synthetic because you really want like a brush that like snaps back well, but also holds water well for painting with gouache. And if you've watched my Himi gouache video, then you know that my surprise favorite thing about Himi gouache is actually their brushes. Their brushes are really good. You can see it has great snapback for a synthetic brush. And they're really, really affordably priced. So that's actually my favorite thing about Himi. These are a 6 and a 5 in flat. Okay, now what kind of paper do you use for doing nice final paintings and for finished pieces for gallery shows? Here's what I like. So for a really affordable option when you're starting out, I really like just the Canson Bristol board, the 9x12 inch. It's really nice, thick, smooth paper, as you can see. And a really good size for starting on. And this is really good for a lot of practice too, if you want to practice on paper that's not in a sketchbook and have single paintings. Another really good option is the Canson extra large watercolor paper. This is a cold press surface, so if you like that, see I mix it up a lot, so if you like a cold press surface, this is a really great option for you. Now we're getting into the more expensive stuff, which is obviously the Arches watercolor paper. You may have seen this before. So this comes in a block, which means there are multiple pages on each block, 20 pages total. And then, so it's already stretched for you, so you don't take it off when you're painting. You paint it, and then you take something like a palette knife at the end or an X-Acto blade, and you slide it in here, and then you release it from the seal. And so this is really nice paper to paint on. It's archival. I prefer the hot press, but it also comes in cold press. It comes in a variety of sizes. It's 100% pure cotton. You always want a natural fiber or cotton paper when you're painting with gouache because gouache is water-based and you want something that can absorb the water. Otherwise, and then leave the paint pigment on top. Otherwise, you're gonna get like water sliding all around. And so this is one of my preferred paper options when I'm doing gallery pieces or final art pieces. And then my favorite is actually illustration board, but illustration board's a little bit harder to store because the one I like is the Crescent 100, so it's a little bit thicker. What I like about it is that it is really flat and sturdy, so when you're painting on it, it doesn't warp. Gouache goes down really beautifully on illustration board. That's traditionally what's used for gouache with animation artists and advertising artists. And like all the backgrounds that you see painted at Disney from the Disney movies are all on illustration board. And I know this because I had a teacher who did them and he brought them in to show us. And so this is actually what the back of Crescent boards look like now. And these are actually not too expensive. You can find them in the board section of your art supplies store. And I usually get the 100 illustration board. It's a heavyweight illustration board in the Crescent brand. It usually comes in a 15 by 20 inch, and then you can cut it down with a blade and ruler or straight edge. All right, so speaking of illustration board, let's talk about tape. So I like to use an artist tape or a low-tech, low-pH tape when I'm taping down. So say I was using that illustration board, I'll take a piece of Masonite board that I just happen to have. You can find this at like a hardware store probably pretty easily. I like to have a hard surface that I can move around. Normally I would want to cut this piece down so it fits this, or whatever parameters your project is, you want the Masonite board to be big enough. But just for example's sake, here's what I have. And then I would use the artist tape to tape it down. Artist tape is low pH and low tax so that it doesn't leave any residue that will distort or color your paper medium for years to come. And then I recently discovered this from another YouTuber. It's like a Japan tape called Nichiban tape, I think. And I really like this actually for taping down. It's a thinner tape than artist tape. And I really like this for taping down clean edges, and it peels up really easily and really cleanly without tearing up the paper. It's also low tax, so I really like that too. So Masonite board, artist tape, Nichiban tape. You of course always need paper towels. And speaking of that, we're gonna talk about cleanup. All right, so say you have a dirty palette. What I would do is re-wet the palette so everything's wet, and then wipe it with a paper towel to take all the paint and pigment off as well as you can before rinsing the rest of it clean, because you don't want to wash all that pigment down your drain into the waterways. So that's the best way to like take it off, like just physically take it off with a paper towel and then rinse the rest of it clean. So that's how you clean your gouache pigments. To clean your brushes, I love this Masters brush cleanser. It's just a classic for a reason. What you would do is rinse your brush underwater, wet this whole side underwater too, and then rub your brush in that. And then just really massage the brush to reshape it into a point under running water until it runs clean. And then say you have a brush you want to restore. Like there are quite a few that I probably could restore. Like this one, for example, where it's kind of frayed, but I still love it. It's still in pretty good shape. You dip it in this brush restorer after you clean it, and then you can shape it. And then you let it sit and dry like that, so it dries back into like a less frizzed out point. Thank you so much for joining me for another video. I hope it was helpful, and if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. See you next time. Bye-bye.